Great. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Friday's Women in Recruitment webinar. Really nice to see everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Natasha Clark, who normally hosts, sends her apologies. She should be back with us next week, which will be great. And in the meantime, you have me again. So today we are joined by Una McGuinness. Una has many years at senior level within the recruitment industry. She's got a huge amount of experience, and she's going to share a lot of that insight with us today. So it's a real pleasure to have you, Una. I'll let you do the full introduction shortly. So today we're going to be talking about returning from furlough. There's been a lot of conversations around returning from furlough that have focused a lot on the technicalities. But this session is going to be slightly different. It's going to be more on that kind of human level, and for people who are actually bringing team members back or are returning from furlough themselves. It's for some people it's going to be a real challenge, especially given the fact that many people have had 2 or 3 months off. So there's going to be lots of things to think about in order to get back into work, hit the ground running, and try getting yourselves back to that level in which you were operating previously before all of this. And so Una's going to talk us through and give some really practical takeaways. In terms of how we'll run the session, it will be as it usually is on a Friday, really interactive. So please make sure that any questions that you have, just pop them in the chat, and where appropriate, I'll feed them into you, Una. But if you want to wait till the end, we'll have space there for Q&A. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. Lovely to be with you and to be supporting women in recruitment. So just to give you a little bit of background, as Jo has said, I've worked in recruitment for many years. I was lastly global MD at a company called Aspire, which is a digital marketing and media recruitment business. And there I was responsible for all recruitment operations, and I also launched our international offices. So I've got experience working internationally and launching internationally. And why that's important is because obviously I did most of that from home. So I've been sort of remote working and remote managing teams and business units remotely for many years. So I've got lots of kind of experience, prior to this year of doing that. And then for the last couple of years, about 18 months, I've been working as a business consultant. So no longer running a recruitment business, but helping recruitment businesses on their sort of strategy and marketing, and and really kind of anywhere I can add support. So for me, COVID has been it's been a real change, because my business was very much going to businesses face to face, spending time working on a project, working with leaders or directors of businesses. And so I have been in a position, the same as a lot of people, having to kind of rethink what do I do now and how do I adapt my sort of business model for the new world. So I'm just kind of letting you know that to understand that obviously I've been through a lot of change as well. And I think everybody has their own kind of personal COVID journey, and I think how it's affected them in their business, them personally, their family, maybe they've suffered in terms of lost people or whatever. So I think there's one thing I would say is that, when you're starting to think about coming back to work and starting to approach and think about what it'll be like, just remember that everyone's had their own journey, and it's probably been quite a difficult one for most people, and no one's found this scenario easy, even if you've been working in an industry that's been incredibly busy, or you've been working, helping support, i.e., doctor, nurse, or working in distribution or something. As I said, nobody has had it easy. So in terms of kind of mindset, I thought I'd start by sort of talking to you about, obviously I've never been on furlough. I kind of feel a bit furloughed because I'm not really working at the moment, but I have been doing some work, but I've never been furloughed. But what I have experienced is when I've had children and come back to the working environment after a period of time off, obviously on maternity. And I know that I felt that I had to sort of reinvent myself, which sounds a bit crazy because when I first came back, I was the director of a business, but I'm just trying to explain that at any level, I think you can feel somewhat that you question your ability, or question, are you capable again to do the role that you left, you know, prior to the gap? And I know that I felt that others that have been in the environment, so maybe if you're on furlough and there are others that are working in the environment still, you somehow feel like they maybe are going to be better, or have the upper hand, or are going to have more sort of knowledge. So I think it's, you know, it's allowing yourself to understand you're potentially going to feel vulnerable, not weak, but a little bit vulnerable, and to kind of accept that, but also perhaps even slightly disadvantaged, but you need to understand that you're not. And that, you know, as I said, from my experiences, I quite quickly re-established myself, but I did feel like I sort of had to reinvent myself a little bit in terms of my role, and demonstrating that I could work as hard and as be successful as anyone, and I think I put quite a lot of pressure on myself. So I think my message would be, don't put that pressure on yourself, try and avoid that, or recognise it, and certainly talk to your colleagues or your manager if you find that you are, you know, overworking yourself to try and compensate or demonstrate that you still have the skills that you had sort of, you know, 3 or 4 months ago. Before I go on, I think we wanted to do a quick poll, if that was all right. Wasn't it, Jo? Just to kind of get a feeling. For the first one was just, if you, those that are attending the webinar, if you're on furlough or you're going back to work. So, you know, if you could just let us know, obviously, have you been furloughed? Yes or no. Obviously, all answers are autonomous. You know, we're not going to be publicising who said what. So, if you could just let us know, if you could just answer this now on your screen. Have you been furloughed? Yes or no, to give us an idea roughly of our participants. Jo, how does what are we getting then? Okay, so 60% have been furloughed, 40% have not. Okay, thank you. That kind of help. So we've got both audiences here, obviously people that are working, 40% have continued working through COVID, perhaps in a part-time capacity or whatever, and then 60% who've been on furlough. Okay, what was the second question, Jo?
If yes, are you returning to work in the near future?
If we could just ask that one then, so we know that 60% are furloughed and 40. We've got one more and then we'll crack on. So if yes, so of the 60% that are furloughed, if you are furloughed, are you returning to work in the near future? So do you know, have you got a date, or no, or don't know at all?
Just
okay.
Not everybody's answered that, so I'll show you the results now.
Yeah. So, okay, so of those that have answered, okay, 89% have said yes, they are returning to work, which is super, and 11% don't know. Okay, brilliant. Yeah. All right, thank you very much for that.
Did you want the third one?
Yeah, that's the level. Yeah, so let's just do, and then we'll, yeah. So if you can answer this question for us, guys, this is just which of the following best describes your role. So again, we've got an idea of who our audience is here today. So are you a billing consultant, team leader or manager, a senior manager, director or MD of a recruitment business, or other? So potentially in a support or marketing or finance function or whatever. So perfect. Okay, so it's really spread. Okay, right, so we've got quite an equal spread between consultant, team leader and senior manager, and then 40%, 47% other. Okay, right then, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that. So as I said, so thinking about a sort of positive mindset and getting yourself in the right kind of frame of work and to go, right frame of mind to go back to work, I think it's really important to think about your kind of why you liked the role before, why you liked your job before, what you enjoyed about it, why were you particularly good, or what particular areas were you brilliant at? So your client relationships, your candidates, your relationships with your colleagues, or if you're a team leader, how you managed and communicated with your team. So I think it's really important to understand and think about all the things you know you're good at and you've developed those skills within your career to date. I think it's really important when you're passionate about something and you try and maybe you then go back into the workplace and you sometimes become quite overly focused. And I know that I found this, that as I said, when I went back into the workplace, I was so overly committed to getting everything right and trying to prove to everyone that I hadn't sort of lost it, and I was able to be the leader or be the biller I went back, and actually when I first went back, it was a difficult time, and I had to take over a billing role as well, because one of our digital team had some problems. So, so I think that when you do come back, it's really important that, yes, be passionate, but don't get withdrawn or don't let that kind of overtake you a little bit, because again, you've kind of had not had work to think about for a long time, and then you do. And so it's really important that, as I said, you don't withdraw and you kind of talk to people, and also, think outwardly. That's what I would say. So, and what I mean by that is think about, how can I best benefit my team? How can I benefit my colleagues? How can I benefit my clients? What are the kind of actions that I can do that's going to add value and benefit those around me? Because once you start thinking outwardly, you start to normally think more positively about how you can have, a good influence and a positive effect. I think it's really important to understand that people won't see things through your lens. So if you are feeling like, why aren't they asking me how I'm feeling? Why aren't they giving me, talking to me about training and support I need? You need to talk to them about it, or on the other hand, they might be giving you too much and too much information and too many questions, are you okay, etc. So I think it's really important that you realize people don't see things the same way that you do, and if you need to explain and you need to ask questions, then sort of speak out really and talk to them. And I know from memory it took me a while to kind of, I think, have the confidence, because that little question, that person inside your head says, no, don't do that, it'll be okay, or whatever, or starts chipping away in a negative way. But I think it's really important that you have the confidence to talk to, as I said, your boss or your colleagues about sort of how you're feeling. And I think that it's another thing that I think is really important in terms of having a positive mindset is about be constantly learning. What have you learned about yourself during COVID? If you're coming back, what have your teammates and your boss and your company learned about the clients, the market, and things like that? So I think it's important to kind of position yourself, and also, self-development in terms of, if you have done any, fantastic. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. You're starting again. I would say that looking at how you can be constantly learning and developing now you're going back, it is really important, and I think really kind of positive really for people in terms of how they feel. And the kind of last point on sort of mindset is, don't be too hard on yourself. The role you're going to go back to, or obviously your team are coming back into, is going to feel and look different. So you're not just about to pick up where you left off. It's just, the markets aren't like that. It's very different. You may get there, but when you get there, it might look slightly different anyway. But obviously, it's really important that there are so many moving parts at the moment. It's not quite as straightforward as it was. And so where you might have thought this is what a good day looks like, or a good week, or a good month, that probably will need to be addressed and looked at, because they're not going to necessarily be the same metrics and the same outputs or the same milestones that you've been used to. That doesn't mean they're not successful. They're just going to be sort of different, really.
You mentioned earlier the importance of talking and being vocal about how you may be feeling upon your return. There's been a lot around mental health and the unfortunate result of COVID and people being away from the rhythm and routine of work, and that resulting in a lot of mental health challenges, especially across our industry. For those people that have had maybe reoccurring mental health challenges during COVID, caused by a lack of rhythm and routine, or just their lived experience of COVID that's brought on anxiety, how should those people be approaching a conversation about that with their managers? Should they be talking to HR? Should they be talking to their manager about that before they come back? How important is it to have that conversation?
I think it's always going to be a difficult conversation to have, isn't it? that, you know, we know, and you know, it's although it's a lot more out there and open, and I think people are much more accepting and realise that, you know, the challenges that people, and the stress and the mental health issues that people are having because of all the things you've identified. I would always say that it's, you know, your manager or your leadership team, you know, it's in their best interest, and they should want to and should have a responsibility to look after you and your welfare. So, you know, I think the most important thing is to have that conversation. And then also, you know, they're not necessarily obviously a mental health expert, but they might be able to coach and help you to identify what kind of things are going to make you feel good when you come back to work. So the routine, the sort of feedback, coaching sessions or mentoring sessions, working maybe side by side by a peer who hasn't been on furlough, and supporting them until you gain your confidence or something. So there might be steps that you can take that, you know, it's like anything, isn't it? What types of things in your job and your life make you feel good, and how can you start to reimagine those and kind of bring them back into, you know, we know we're not all jumping on the tube or the train or jumping in our car and driving to work and going to have this sort of instant sort of positives and negatives of your team and your environment, all of that. It's not going to be like that. But are there things that your boss can help you put into place? But as I said, they have a responsibility to support you, and it may be that you know, there are various lots of different initiatives in terms of mental health, and Rhonda, who I think has been on, has you know, is really championing mental health and recruitment. So there are resources there at fairly low costs, so cost shouldn't be an obstacle. And yes, of course, if your business has got an HR person that you might feel more comfortable speaking to, do. Or obviously, if you don't feel comfortable speaking to your direct line manager, then maybe another manager, or, you know, someone on the board or something like that, that you might feel a little bit more easier, you know, because you don't want to be judged or whatever. But absolutely, you know, they have got responsibility. They will and definitely should want to help you. So talking to them, and it might be, as you said, getting back into a routine and starting to feel your self-worth in that part of your life gives you back quite a lot of confidence that then can help you in terms of kind of other struggles. But I think, you know, I always say to people, there's a really great business coach, Andrew Silleton. I don't know if you know him, and if you don't know him, anyone, you should look him up. He does kind of sort of, he was doing sort of daily
I've seen
he does 2 a week, and he talks about the 4 keys that you need to look after to keep yourself strong, and that's your kind of work and sort of business mind, so keeping yourself progressing in terms of that, your actual mindset, your body, and your relationships. So those 4 things, if you have goals and progress in each of those areas, and I think he's spot on, because whether that's your relationships in terms of who you live with, like relationships with your colleagues, you know, your friends and family, you know, if you can do one good thing a week to make you feel, or one good thing a day to make you feel positive for those, then ultimately everything else is positively affected. So yeah, I would say that's
there's some great resources out there. You've just mentioned 2 people who are doing a lot of work in that space. One of our attendees has asked a question, and I can understand this. How do you approach a manager about this topic who has minimal empathy, that you just know isn't going to get this, especially if you've been told that you've got to return to work in a few days after you've just had 2 or 3 months off, and you're feeling really daunted about it? Where do you start with that?
Well, I think it's really important, you know, that maybe you do approach it. If you don't think the person has a lot of empathy, and having a sort of scheduled business meeting per se, you know, a scheduled Zoom like this is going to work, maybe, you know, as you would have before, can we have a sort of maybe off the record chat? Maybe it's a phone call, it's not a Zoom, so it's not quite so imposing. You know, maybe I would try a different format in terms of communication. Maybe it's if you feel they don't have empathy, I would hope that they do have some, but maybe they just don't show it very well.
That's a really good point.
Or you approach them with something they're surprised by, and they kind of shut up a bit because they don't know how to deal with it. So I would suggest maybe some ideas might be to drop them an email with some outlines of how you're feeling and what you'd like to discuss, so they can think about it and prepare. You don't need to go into loads of detail, but I'm feeling nervous about this. I'm feeling pressured. I'd really like to talk to you about the support you could give me, because then it gives them the opportunity to go and maybe speak to their boss or at least prepare for the meeting and think, what can I do for you? Then if they don't show any empathy at all, even though you've given them a sort of forewarning, then you're probably going to have to think of another tack then. But I would definitely say either give them some forewarning, and maybe, as I said, you can't say let's go for a walk or social distance, but walk and meet, or you might be able to. But if not, maybe it is a phone call to start with. But obviously, you need to probably think about, they might not be being empathetic because they're feeling pressure and they're worried about their job or they're worried about their business. So it's kind of having an appreciation for, they're probably under quite a lot of stress and strain as well. And I think, maybe it's just, like you said, being honest, but maybe not giving everything, just saying, I'd like to know what kind of support you might be able to give me. This is how I'm feeling. Is there anyone else in your scenario that might be feeling similar? I'm not saying you need chatting to everyone that works in the office, but if you've got certain relationships with anyone, is there anyone else? And maybe then, as I said, maybe if there's a couple of people feeling similar, it might be then that they were able to offer some group support.
Yeah, I really like the idea of almost getting a back to work buddy, or partnering up with, getting together with somebody and having that conversation, and maybe getting that internal support from a colleague rather than going directly to the manager.
But and it's not a gossip, is it? It's this is kind of how I'm feeling, what do you think? And someone might say, do you know what, I don't feel like that, but I know so and so, or exactly, you could maybe, there might be someone else who could sort of mentor and help you back that isn't your direct line manager, and that's probably a better idea anyway, and that you can then be a bit open about and then start to build that confidence a bit, because it's but the one thing I would say is that there are going to be lots of people in a similar situation. So don't let anybody feel that you're in isolation there. Don't imagine everyone in your company is bounding through the door thinking this is the best thing ever and I'm feeling amazing and we're all going to, people, even though they might put on a little bit of a facade, they are going to have those concerns. Haven't been
very good point. Really good point.
So, okay. So then thinking about the kind of current climate, I think it's, I think that you need to, as a manager, you need to talk to the people who are coming back from furlough, and I think it's really important to have a kind of expectations meeting. So what's the current market doing now? What's the expectations of me? What's the kind of milestones we think I should be reaching after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks? You're almost going to be a little bit like a new starter. I know you're not, but your desk isn't going to, it's not like you've just been on holiday and there's lots of stuff happening. You are going to be coming back to probably, very little. So it's going to be a rebuild. So you need to understand that is going to take, that's going to take a couple of months, isn't it? At least. So it's understanding what those milestones are along the way, so that you can feel that you're making progress, but also, as I said, you need to talk to your manager or anyone else in the business about what support you need to get there. So I think, the climate's going to be different. I think, as someone said, I was on a webinar a while ago of a psychologist, and he said, imagine your clients had to pay you for every call. What would you have to do? What information would you have to give? What insights would you have to give? How knowledgeable would you need to be? What would you be able to give them information on the market, the competitors, the candidate base, the jobs in demand, and all these kind of things? And you could start by thinking about that, about brainstorming. What are all the things I need to kind of know to upskill myself, to put myself in that position? And then start to then think about, what's the purpose for you? How are you going to add value to clients and candidates? What information do you need to know? And start internally. And then I think it's really, the current climate is going to demand you to become very knowledgeable quite quickly in terms of what's happening with your clients. So speaking to your clients, what's happening with their clients, what's been positive about COVID, what have been the negatives. As I said, everyone's had their own journey, and lots of our clients will have had people that have been on furlough, that have seen downturns, that have had redundancies. Some might have seen some upsides to it, but nearly every business has obviously been affected, and lots of businesses have changed some of their models or changed the way they do things for a kind of positive. So I think kind of in terms of the climate and the current market you're going back to, it's just upskilling yourself as much as possible, as quickly as possible, so you can start to really kind of feel you're adding value, because you're not suddenly going to just walk back in and pick up loads of jobs. You know, so you need to kind of think, unless again, you know, your market's just turned on, in which case then great, but it might be that those jobs are going to need more control, or you're going to have to, you know, you're going to find the candidate sourcing more challenging, not because there aren't the candidates, but there might be too many, and therefore it's, you know, it's going to take longer to find the really right candidates for the job. So, you know, without a doubt, I would say, you know, you need support of your manager, understand milestones and expectations, and think about what's the purpose of your conversations with your clients and your candidates, and try and glean as much information and give as much value as possible, so that you start to feel you're really getting to grips with the marketplace. And I think that's right for people that are even working, you know, because if you've been working and juggling loads of stuff, you know, it might be that you've got a marketing team that's helping you, supporting you with content, things you can talk to. It might be that you haven't. It might be that you and your team need to say, look, we need to find some really good insights in the market that we can talk to clients again, because we spoke to them 5 times in 2 months and they weren't recruiting. So what can we talk to them about now?
Yeah, I think you raise a really important point. Your clients and candidates are going to be leaning on you more than ever for market insight. The more expert information, the more of an expert you come across as, the more insight you can give them, the better conversations, and even involving them in that research, you know, going out there, sending out surveys, doing bite-sized interviews with them, just to get that engagement going, and for you to catch up as well as a recruiter, to really find out what's going on.
Exactly. So if, you know, you might be able to brainstorm, a Zoom brainstorm with your team, or, you know, your company or your group or your immediate team, and say, right, let's brainstorm what were the kind of really important questions. What would we want to know about what's happening within our clients? So, you know, what they've got in terms of priorities going forward, what's happening with their supply chains, what's happening with their delivery, or whatever, all the questions you could ask. And then you've got a kind of package of what does good look like. Well, good could look like if we found 3 bits of this information out from every client. So, you know, at the end of the week, or when you're feeding back to your teams, your colleagues, if everyone's found out 3 bits of information from a dozen clients, you really start to have some kind of, like you're saying, some really, really good insights that's going to make you, your team, the leadership team, whatever, feel actually we can start to understand now where we should be focusing, or what good looks like, or how we can add more value, or it might lead us to, you know, new solutions or new opportunities within clients. So absolutely, I think, you know, you need to kind of, I wouldn't be worrying about next year. I'd just be thinking, what's the next 90 days, the next 3 months, you know, what can that look like if I was a team leader or MD or whatever? Or I would certainly be thinking, if I'm bringing people back from furlough, you know, where do we want to be in 3 months' time, and what can we control, and things like that you can really control. You know, you can't necessarily control, obviously, the job flow and how much money you're going to make or whatever, but you can control, you know, how you're going to approach clients, what information you're going to identify, and then how you're going to deal with that information to lead you, hopefully, to gain business.
And if you were still on desk and you were due back to go to work, to work after furlough next week, what would your first week look like? What would be at the top of your to-do list?
You know, don't do what you often do when you go on holiday and spend days going through every email, because you're not going to feel great.
You'd be there all month.
You know, and I think the first thing I'd say is, obviously it will depend on your business, because if some of your clients have been neglected, or because of, you know, just timing and for no fault, and they weren't recruiting, you know, your priorities, my priorities would be understanding what's happening within my business, and the teams and the people, and, you know, where we have got job flow coming from, or what teams have been doing well, what teams have, you know, if my team were all furloughed, then obviously you're coming back to, like I said, a fairly, you know, desert start, but that's fine, because you know where you're at then. So understanding where you're at, I think understanding definitely the levels of activities, and what if you have that kind of data, or you can speak to your colleagues, because when you left, if picking up a job a week and getting 5 interviews and getting 3 placements a month was normal, then you're going to think that's normal now, but it won't be. So it's kind of understanding what the bars are, and as I said, there's milestones and things. And then I think, you know, it's small steps, isn't it? So I always say to people, this is how I run my own area of business now, is I start with the power of three. So 3 specific business objectives that's going to get 3 objectives each day that's going to help me get closer to my milestones, whatever my goal is. So your goal might be that in 1 month I want to have identified X, Y, and Z with all my clients and candidates and know, you know, this kind of information. And your goal shouldn't be, I'm going to pick up 5 jobs, because if you don't get that 5, you're going to feel like you haven't been successful. So I would always say start with purpose of 3 every day, and then obviously if you get that done by 11 o'clock, there's almost more stuff you can do. And I think that so smaller objectives will get you to your ultimate goal. So break it down, have an understanding of what's happening within your team, and then I think definitely do stuff that's proactive. If you don't like new business, or you haven't done much in a business and you're coming back to a new business desk, then I think it's important to work out how you're going to help build your confidence there. So the great thing about Zoom is you can maybe say, look to a colleague or your manager, can I join some Zoom calls and see how you're doing the client calls and client conversations now? No client's going to mind if there's 3 people on a call now, are they? It's not, yeah. So are there things you can do, or maybe there's some role playing and stuff? Are there things you can do to build your confidence, because you are going to have to do it? And then it's like anything, isn't it? The sooner you start making a few calls or start speaking to people, but having a plan, you know, what resources have you got? What marketing literature, what sources, you know, what value can we give the clients? Because just sitting away doing loads of cold calling, it's not, you know, it's probably not going to make you feel or get you to the where you need to get to. You need to have a sort of plan. I call them, I don't get through, I can send them this, or I've got a bit of marketing information, or I've got this, or I schedule in my next call. So I know, you know, I know the plan of what I'm kind of doing. And obviously your candidate base, because, you know, a number of them may be on furlough, or maybe just, you know, it might be a really good opportunity to identify the core key talent, you know, within your area, and that may be open to opportunities now that wouldn't have been 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago. So yeah, so I think that's probably what I do.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. I think that I would, as I said, a really good way as well to think about when you've got to plan your day, you know, often it's really good, obviously, planning in chunks of time into your outlook. So say, for example, you know, you're planning, right, I'm going to speak to those 4, I want to speak to, or I've identified and I've arranged to speak to X clients tomorrow morning, or I've booked in Zoom calls. Another really positive thing to do is think about who do I want to be when I make those calls? So how do I want to appear? What do I want the client to go away thinking? You know, so thinking about, I want to come across as really optimistic. I want to come across as really enthusiastic, supportive. So what are the kind of words what characteristics do you want the person you're communicating with to move away from? And you're much more likely to display those characteristics. It's like visualization. So if you think, I'm going to make a difficult call, it's going to be difficult, the client's difficult, blah, blah, blah. What happens? You go in with sort of guard up. But if you go in with I'm going in really optimistically, and I'm sure I'm going to get information out of this client. At the very best, I'm going to establish a relationship, but I want him to think that, you know, I'm really optimistic about kind of business going forward. Then it really helps. You know, so if you think about a challenging scenario, maybe with your team or with your manager, think about, how do I want them to feel after this conversation, and then how will that direct my kind of communication, what I might say.
No, it's a good, I mean, there may be a tendency to start a conversation dwelling on maybe the things that aren't happening in your industry, in your sector, but so that's a really good piece of advice, focusing on those green shoots, that optimistic viewpoint.
Yeah, and just a really good question for a client or a candidate is, what's been positive for you during COVID? In your industry, what have you seen as positive movements? You know, in recruitment, we talk about the collaboration, the amount of training, these kind of webinars. There's been so much positive stuff that it can only lead to good stuff, can't it? So I think, you know, we don't stand here sitting up, you know, talking about the lost jobs and obviously that is a reality, but, you know, and obviously that could be a reality when you're talking to a client. So it's important as well to be able to have some questions that you can steer that will give you kind of some sort of positive outcomes and positive communications with the client. Because no one wants to come away from a client and say, right, they haven't got any jobs, they're downsized, they've done this, and you come away and you haven't got anything positive out of a call. And that will set you apart from some of the other recruiters that are being maybe still quite transactional and, you know, are you recruiting, and not sort of thinking a little bit sort of bigger picture as it kind of were.
Sure, great.
So so has anyone got any questions about anything we said? Maybe like saying about going back to work, situations with your manager, or anything else?
Yeah, there's a question here, just with regards to a dialogue that's taken place between somebody that's looks like they're returning back from furlough. I think that they feel that their manager is already piling on the pressure, and suggesting projects and business development and talking targets. And I think this person's just feeling slightly, you know, I'm not coming back till next week. That's a lot for me to take on right now when I've been out of the business for 3 months. What advice would you give that attendee?
I think that, well, on obviously strictly rules of furlough, of course you can't be working. You can be training, and you can be doing some of your individual research, and you can be improving yourself. But, you know, you certainly shouldn't feel under pressure to start to be making any call. Well, you can't really, you know, you can't be making any calls or doing any outreach or doing anything in the guise of working for the business. So I think, again, I think I would, I suppose I think about it from one point of view as, well, why are they asking you to do that? You know, so, you know, what's their kind of intention? That they're probably intention is that they want you to hit the ground running, and they want you to have the best start possible. So think about it in maybe a positive light. Maybe they're trying to do this because they're thinking through their own lens. Well, if it was me, I'd probably want to be getting this all ready and going before I go back. But I think you need to be direct in terms of, you know, it's making you feel slightly pressured. You don't have the resources to do that at the moment, and obviously, you know, you don't feel comfortable working while you're on furlough. But obviously, as soon as you're back, then you're gonna be really open to insights and opportunities and direction and coaching and things like that. So that's probably how I'd approach it. And also, I don't know the person, but, you know, they might have families to look after, they've got their own priorities, you know, it's a difficult time. But obviously, if you look at it from their point of view, they might have been working full time and juggling all of this and thinking, I just need to get everyone up and running as quickly as possible because there's so much on. So they might be doing it with the right intentions, but actually it's kind of wrong, slightly wrong communication and wrong sort of platform because you're not yet at work.
It could be useful. I know that's probably something that I would consider doing, just spending a couple of days just getting my head back in my sector and just putting together a little bit of a plan for my first 2 weeks, my first month, without logging on and actually doing work. I think I'd find that quite useful for my my thought process, getting back in the zone, getting myself psyched up and excited to come back to work. Yeah,
looking at what your clients and candidates are doing on LinkedIn, on social media, what kind of what press releases or what news people have been putting out, looking for. Yeah, definitely. I think any industry insight is going to make you feel probably in a better position if you're able to do that. I would absolutely say, because that's your own independent research, isn't it? And also, you know, if it was me, I'd probably be looking back or think, right, I'm going to spend a couple of hours going through my old training notes if I've got access to them or anything, you know, because things like control are going to be really important, qualification of jobs, you know, all the kind of, you know, the sort of things that we get a bit sloppy with when there's lots of opportunity and lots of them, we're really busy. You know, every job you've got to treat like it's the only job you're ever going to get. So you've got to fill it, you know, that's what I would be saying. And so, you know, it might be that you can, or obviously if you've got access, if you've got LinkedIn Learning or any other resources, and there's loads of recruiting gym, there's loads of free resources out there as well. Maybe think about, you know, if I have got a bit of time, would I feel in a better place if I'd done this for myself? And, you know, would that help me in terms of my mindset and feeling more confident? The answer probably will be yes. Well, in which case, then it's probably quite a good idea to kind of, you know, to have a go and to sort of do it, isn't it? So
got quite a few questions coming through.
Yeah.
Did you want to finish off? Did you have a final section, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about focus that I think you asked me what I would do, but I think, you know, if you're going back after furlough and you're working from home, I mean, there's been countless blogs. I think I've written blogs. We've had things on working from home, but I think it's just, you know, it's going to be different. So understand what your distractions are going to be. You've got to try and be as productive as you can. So if you've obviously got people in your house and people that rely on you for other things that you've been doing whilst on furlough, you know, you need to kind of set those boundaries, you know, when you will and won't be available. And also kind of, I have found, and I think from speaking to people, the most motivated people, when people are the most motivated, it's when they've kind of evolved into a routine, not like said, right, 8:30 every morning, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, because it might be that you've got children, it might be that you've got your partners coming back in from work then, it might be, you know, so having a degree of flexibility, but evolving that routine, actually, you know, I've found that I like to get up early and get a couple of hours or get stuff done when I need to before the rest of the household gets up. I don't get up every morning at that time, but it kind of works for me when I do have things to do, when I want thinking time. So I think it's just know your energy levels, know what gives you energy, make sure you know, like we all say, you're eating the right stuff, you're focusing, because I think a lot of people that I've spoken to have been like, God, I'm so tired all the time over COVID, because you're not going out and doing your normal stuff. And so
you're just not getting that mental stimulation.
You're not, exactly. But obviously getting a routine back, you'll get some of that. But also you don't want to burn yourself out mentally and physically. So if you haven't been doing a bit of exercise, or you haven't been maybe as healthy, or maybe drinking a few more glasses of wine every week, you know, all those kind of things, you just got to think, right, it's a bit of a new beginning to
I've got a really interesting question actually that ties in with this. It's just in terms of how we manage going back one day a week or 2 days a week initially, as you know, the government guidance. How, if you are going back just 1 or 2 days a week, how do you find a flow and get stuck in? If furlough rules are preventing you from going back full time, it's a bit, you know, stopping, starting, you're in one day, then you're back, you know, you're back on furlough.
I mean, I suppose, I don't know, if you're working part-time, you're returning part-time, and so the government are paying part-time and your employer's paying part-time. I don't know whether you can do 4 half days, or well, you can obviously because it's a number of hours. So potentially, I don't know whether that would work and suit whoever the person who's put this. It might be that actually they've got children or they've got other responsibilities, so they can't do that, you know, so actually 2 block days is kind of how it's best going to work for everybody, or their business wants that. I would suggest that, you're right, it's difficult. If you're starting to get traction, manage roles and things like that, if you're building up again and sort of reaching out to clients and candidates, I think it's probably doable. You just need to be really honest. I'm not available on Wednesday. Please email me by all means, but I won't pick up I won't respond till Thursday. Say you're working Tuesdays and Thursdays or something. I think you need to have an agreement with your with your boss in terms of, let's just say a role does come in from your client on the day you're not working, what's going to happen in that time? You know, can someone support you, pick it up and arrange a Zoom calls for you to take that role when you're working? You know, is it day critical or can it happen the next day? Just like you could do that for someone else. So, you know, are there ways that maybe you could buddy up? If you were working 2 days and someone else was working 2 days, because I think about it when we had people on maternity and work flexible hours, you know, we sort of buddied people up a little bit. So you sort of half keeping an eye, just in case something really...
Yeah, we've done something similar in terms of breaking those 2 full days into 4 half days. So there's that constant communication and involvement and and
I think you can easily say to clients
4 days a week.
Yeah, I'm only working till 1 today. No one's going to say, well, why? You know, everyone knows, well, I'm back available. So I think don't be afraid to communicate to your clients and candidates, I'm only available till 1. And also, I used to say to my clients, my teams, give your clients and candidates a deadline if you want to speak to them anyway. Don't, just call me whenever. No, can you call me between these times? Because it creates urgency. So I think that being honest with your clients and candidates, yes, it is going to be more challenging, but it's only because we're probably thinking when we're working 5 days a week, how much role and how much continuity we had there and how difficult it would have been just to drop everything for a day, because it's very reactive recruitment. You know, you get feedback when you've got to do this and you've got to do that. But obviously building up, you're not going to be quite there yet, are you? You're not going to have that sort of busy desk.
Good point.
So I think that whilst you're right to kind of think, how's the flow going to work, hopefully it'll get to the point where you're able to feed back to your boss that actually I could easily fill another day. That's why they're doing it, because they can't afford, obviously, as a business, you can't afford to bring everyone back full time and not have any revenue coming in. So as soon as you can sort of demonstrate that actually I could do another day or another half day or whatever, because you're getting some continuity, and you feel that you can demonstrate you're making the right levels of progress to yourself and to the company, then hopefully it should only be for a shortish period of time. But if not, if it was for a long period of time and it's going to be for the next few months, then I think I would suggest kind of having some kind of buddy system that you could support each other in the other days, so that, you know, the last thing you want to do is you being chasing or speaking to a client, talking to them regularly, and then they come back with, you know, whatever. But if you kind of knew that, you'd position it as in, I'm not available to talk that day, or I can take the brief then, and then the next day you have a couple of hours off. And you know what I mean? I think it depends on how much flexibility you've got as an individual, because you
there's some really good tips there, really good ideas. There's several questions around bringing metrics into it. When bringing people back, what kind of KPIs and success factors metrics would you advise on giving the team to make sure they've got the right motivation, the right pressure when coming back? We've had several very similar questions, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so I think in terms of kind of KPIs, and, you know, I'm a great believer in KPIs and key performance indicators, because well, as a leader, it keeps you sane in terms of knowing what the metrics are and what's happening, but also in terms of people. But obviously they need to be used in the right way, in a motivational way, and people, I think, should own their data and know what's kind of happening. So, but I think going back into it, you know, I think if I was a leader now and I had some of my team that were furloughed and some that weren't, I'd be looking at what were the levels of activity that the team that haven't been furloughed and as a business per head we're achieving. So what are we currently kind of doing? And obviously I wouldn't be expecting the person that was coming back from furlough to be achieving that from day one. They need to have a period of time to be able to rack up to those activity levels. So, you know, they can't have first interviews and stuff like that straight away. So I think mine would be a sort of like, these are, I think, the milestones. This is where I think we should be able to get, you know, you in the next 4 weeks, because this is the level of sort of activity that's currently happening. What you couldn't do is set them higher targets than the current team are delivering. But obviously if the current team are on a positive upward trajectory, you can demonstrate that to them. This is kind of what we were doing as a business in March and April. This is what's been in May and June, and this is the level of activity. So I think, you know, nobody wants to feel they're being treated differently, but at the same time, they want to be treated fairly. So I would say, look at what milestones you would expect them to achieve in a month from sort of a standing start, and then how long you think it's going to get them to get to the same level as the existing staff. They might be very experienced, and that might be, you know, within 4 weeks they should be there. But if they're less experienced or they haven't got the same kind of clients or opportunities, it might take a little bit longer. But I think, as I said, it is a bit of a there are so many moving feasts at the moment. So it might be that next week, you know, you as a business get a lot of new business, or one of your key clients come back, or some clients come back on recruiting, and suddenly, you know, you're able to pass them roles, and that then would change. So I think it needs to be a kind of an expectation meeting based on what current activities are, minus to give them some time to get up to speed. However, with that communication comes, you know, if we start to see more of an uplift, then we will reevaluate these expectations. Not every day, but we will have a, you know, we'll have a sensible conversation. Yeah. But I think whatever you do, you need to get the person who's delivering to be able to own them. If the person that's got to deliver them doesn't feel they're achievable, for whatever reason, maybe it's a lack of confidence, maybe it's because they've already started talking to their colleagues, or whatever it might be, you've got to get them to believe, or if not, you've got to reduce them so they can at first hit the targets you give them, so that they regain that confidence, and then they feel, and then we can sort of move them up. So I think you know, that's what I would sort of suggest, and be very open about, you know, what the rest of the business is doing and things like that.
What if, as a manager, you've never managed through KPIs or performance indicators? It's completely new to your team, and they're just not used to working in that KPI environment. what kind of what advice would you give there?
I think if you are, I think then it needs to be very much on kind of milestones. So if you haven't had, we have to, this is the sort of jobs and first interviews or candidate registration numbers, it's just been purely on revenue, which I assume.
Especially if it's a mature team as a high performing team.
Yeah, exactly.
COVID,
Then I would probably get my team together and I would say, okay, so, you know, how we work to manage things before, as you'll know, our environment was this. So you all had your 10 grand a month target to hit or whatever it was. And you know, we aren't going to be able to measure our success on that same metric right here, right now. So how are we going to measure our progress to kind of get there? So ultimately, you know, in order to, in a contingency recruitment business or contract business, you have to get jobs on and you have to get committed jobs or you have to get contracts on, you know. So, you know, it's about saying, okay, well, if we didn't measure those types of things before, maybe we should look at our data and say, okay, to make 15 grand a month, what were we doing? What was happening? What were we doing? If we don't have that knowledge, maybe we need to look back and say, okay, so in a really good month, this is what we were doing as a team. So guys, where do we think we should be pitching our success to begin with? And I'm sure if you do that collaboratively with your team, they will come up with the right kind of metrics and the right kind of KPIs. They're not going to want every KPI, but they might come up with 2 or 3 that actually really make sense to you as a business, that you can then say, well, are we all committed then as a team? This is how we're going to sort of measure our success until we get to the situation where we're constantly billing, you know, that kind of level. But there are very few teams and consultants that just constantly bill at a superior level. People have ups and downs and dips and whatever. So I think that, you know, even if you've been a business that's never done that before, I think it's a really positive exercise to look back and say, you know, what were the components of what we had to do to make that revenue in a month? Because you will need, if your margins and your business has gone like that, you're going to need something that's going to give you the confidence you're building it back up. Because if you're just like, well, it doesn't matter, we're just waiting for that revenue to come, we're waiting for that revenue to come, that's not a great way in terms of forecasting and knowing maybe when to bring more people back, or when you can bring people back and make it work more days, and unless you've got other progress kind of indicators, really.
And I think if you're involving your team in those conversations, if they're on that journey with you when it comes to looking at the metrics, you get more ownership and you get more buy-in. It's a much more positive experience than just, you know, throwing numbers at people and expecting them to work in a way that's just doesn't feel comfortable.
And also, I think the reality is the levels of activity in many industries, many things are going to be lower. So also you want to get more out of less, don't you? So it's about also encouraging your team not just to be KPI focused, but also to be quality focused. So what is it we need to do to improve our ratios of fill? You know what I mean? So what is it in terms of number of candidates we have to send out, or number of jobs we have to get on? That's the key metric. How many jobs do we have to take to make a placement? Now, if you can convert an improved percentage, then even if you've got a lower job flow, you're obviously going to convert more revenue than you would have previously. So I think it's about that sort of quality aspect and that upskilling and that sort of, what do we need to do? Because listen, everyone needs to be upskilling at the moment. Every manager, whether you've got 2 years or 20 years, we're going through scenarios that we haven't been through before. So don't think for one moment, oh, it's only me that hasn't quite got the control nailed, or the questions I need to be asking nailed, or the whatever, because even, you know, all your managers will be learning. And so, you know, take it as an opportunity to say, okay, how do we as a team do things better? How do we work more collaboratively? How do we make sure we fill every job, not 1 in 3? You know, obviously that's utopia, filling every job, but you know what I mean? So I think that's the thing I've been thinking of as a team.
Yeah, great. And then just to finish off, we've got 5 minutes. Do you have any top tips for managers to make their team's first week as positive and stress-free as possible, to really get everybody back feeling good about themselves, feeling positive, coming together and working really hard to make sure that, you know, they're securing that future for the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, everyone feels more motivated and works harder when they feel they've got a real purpose. So, you know, as a business, I'm sure every business, you know, most businesses should have a set of kind of values, their purpose proposition, their kind of why we're here, why are we doing this, what do we want. But it might seem a little bit distant now, you know, if you've got a vision which is we're going to grow to this and we're going to be this kind of business. So it might be that you need to kind of re-collaborate what's your why and what's your purpose and why you're here. What is it we want to achieve, guys? What do we, you know, what values do we have as a business? What do we want to stand for as a business? Because I think when you get that collective and people bought into that kind of why and what your values are, then, you know, that they see it more than making the call and, you know, the metrics and the things like that. So I'd say maybe kind of reinvigorating or reimagining that kind of purpose and why. And I think as a manager, if you haven't been on furlough, I think it's really important to give your team and the individuals that have and haven't time to sort of have an open and honest about how it's been, you know, how hopefully they would feel comfortable enough, but to get them talking honestly about, well, how it's been for me, and I've been working, you know, 24/7 for a pay reduction and no bonus, and I've had a child, and I've had the, you know what I mean? So I think that kind of getting them to talk about what their journey has been, everybody, so they feel that connection, because they might feel a little bit them and us, and they might feel as collaborative, or they might feel that you came back last week, I'm coming back this week, so and so didn't, you know, you've got team kind of people at different stages. So I would say a sort of opportunity to talk. I'm not saying social, because obviously I'm not saying a pub quiz or a drink, but, you know, a kind of what their experience has been and what they've learned about COVID and what, you know, learned from the scenarios, from the scenario of COVID and what they feel going forward. And then I think it's simple things like sharing the successes. So, you know, it's not being too hard on them that first week, day, in terms of what their expectations are, but talk about what would good look like at the end of the week, or what would good look like at the end of each day. It might be that you need to kind of be that close. So at the end of each day, what would be good? I might say, well, good to me would be just if I can bring myself up to speed on some of these kind of key issues that are happening in the industry, or if I can make a plan for which tiered clients I need to speak to first. And, you know, there might be kind of planning process to begin with. So what does good look like each day, so you can celebrate those successes with your team and support them with those, you know, those objectives. And so at the end of that first day and first week, you've got a lot of positives to reflect on and talk about, and that every member of the team feels like they've really made kind of progress in that week. But I don't think, you know, right, you know, we expect 50 calls, we expect this and this. Yes, you want that because you want the activity. You need to get them into a position where, you know, that they're doing some really positive things to energize themselves, hopefully to be that productive, you know, in the following kind of days and weeks to come, really.
I think it's just understanding, isn't it, that, you know, if you've been out of the business for 3 months, there's a lot that you're going to have to catch up on.
Yeah,
it takes a while. I mean, I've experienced it coming back from, you know, from a long 2 or 3 week holiday. It does take you a while to get back into that zone, get your confidence levels back up. You know, a couple of days, a week or so isn't going to make a big difference, bigger picture, just by allowing that person to just get comfortable back at the desk. And also to remember that, you know, those employees, the team that haven't been furloughed, they're they're 3 months into this new way of working, 3 or 4 months. People returning from furlough, this is completely new to them, isn't it? They're coming back to a very, very different world.
Yeah,
there might have been changes.
One that they can, you know, they've got the skills, they should have the support, they've got the skills, hopefully their company's got the brand, you know, they've got a lot of positives in terms of, you know, they're in control of their destiny in terms of how they approach or how successful they are, but they need to be supported and collaborated and everything to make them that success. So I think that, you know, there's, you know, and if you, I think you're right, having those conversations and feeling you've got that support is really, really important. I remember, you know, sometimes when I managed my teams in Asia, sometimes, you know, I'd have a one-to-one with one of the leaders there, and actually they just want to have a chat to me about, you know, a really small issue that had blown into something else, you know, and actually it used to throw off, well, I have my agenda, I need to talk about this, I need to talk about, and sometimes you just got to realise people just want to talk to you and just want to feel supported, and so you have to let them do that. So I think that, you know, people will want different things from you as a leader or as a business, but I think most people that have been on furlough, coming back from furlough, they want, you know, honesty, they want transparency, they want support, and they also want to feel that they're treated as an individual. So, you know, and every manager should do that. And even if you're really frustrated because you don't fully making the progress you should be, you know, you need to, the best managers collaborate with their teams and get them to talk about how we're going to do this and how we're going to, you know, reach these milestones, not tell them what to do. So, but yeah, I think, you know, it is going to be it's not without its challenges, but just remember everyone's had their own journey here and no one's had an easy ride of it. So I think that even if they think they have, and they sort of been sitting in my garden for 3 months, they've had times of difficulty, they've had the little voice in their head, am I going to go back to work, whatever it is, or you think, oh, it's okay for them because they've been working. Well, they probably, as I said, had some of their own issues as well. So
well, it's been great. Thank you so much. You've given, there's a lot of tips and takeaways that you've provided with us. It's been great listening to you again, as always. Brilliant.
Well, thank you very much for having me along. And yeah, obviously, if anyone's got any other kind of questions they want to, you know, direct at Joe or I at another time, or drop us an email, then please do. And yeah, good luck to everyone in terms of this next kind of phase. But I definitely think, you know, we've still got the summer to ride out, but I think it's a good time to be going back to work. It's a good time to start to, like saying, rebuild those relationships. So then hopefully, you know, September and through to Christmas, there's going to be some really kind of positive stuff happening in the economy, I think. And certainly we're going to be in a different phase. So that's good. Right.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for dialing in and listening and sending through some great questions and being really involved.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much.
Take care, everybody. Take care. Bye. Bye.